Good morning and welcome to Safety Action's safety webinar for October. I'm your host today, Gary Rowe. Andrea Rowe, our General Manager, is out and about and may be able to join us, but let's see how we go. So this morning, what I'd like to cover is UV risks in Australia, and I might be able to provide some interesting facts and tips that you may not have been aware of. October is National Safe Work Month. We've got WorkSafe Victoria have advised that they're targeting certain industries and certain activities, and we have the new psychosocial regulations in Victoria, and we have new safety regulations, a whole new set of safety regulations in New South Wales. So we've got a bit to look at this morning. And I see there's a bit of dialogue between people, which is excellent. And I think Tracy suggested at least one lead auditor course. I think there's a number if you Google it, but I think maybe what you're asking for is if anyone had any good experience. I think all the auditors are tough. They're pretty pedantic, and eventually they spiral down to low value things, but it's not their fault. That's how safety certification works. But if you need or want safety certification for a business reason, for your business, then maybe that's what you should do. So before we kick off, I always like to have a question or two to just get our mind thinking this morning. So question one from Tracy of our team: what is the difference between a working with children check, often referred to as WWCC, you see this in writing, and a police check? And the second one from Tracy of our team suggested, can you use your volunteer working with children check card for work? You'll see here in the image, the one on the left says volunteer and the one on the right says employee. We've done the same level of check with the same person, hopefully with the same good person. Can we use it for both? We'll come back to those questions near the end. So UV, ultraviolet risk, obviously, is what we're talking about, and what that brings about is skin cancer risk. So what you may be aware of, and you've probably heard a number of times, Australia and New Zealand have the highest incident rate of skin cancer in the world. And almost all skin cancers are caused by exposure, according to health experts, from exposure to ultraviolet radiation, e.g. sunlight. So they tell us it is not some chemical cause of skin cancers or some other genetic, it's exposure to sunlight is the primary cause, and we have the highest incident rate of that. So let's have a look at some of the aspects of this and maybe some of the practical things you and I can do to protect ourselves, family and co-workers. Typically, and we also hear about people with a medical condition causing low vitamin D. And so one of my colleagues suggested, well, maybe for those people, we might be telling people you might need a bit more sunlight. So let's have a look. Typically, for most people, incidental exposure to sunlight is generally sufficient to give you and I enough vitamin D. So you don't have to go out and sunbathe to get enough for most healthy people. So people with a medical condition are generally prescribed a course of vitamin D supplements. Generally, it's not a prescribing extra sun exposure. So, and there's a scale here at the bottom of the image here, just showing UV1 to UV11, and the advice is above 3, take care. So this would be things like sunscreen and shade and things which we'll explain in a moment. Another interesting point, you go to field events, you go to shows, you go to all sorts of things, and people will either sell or give away baseball caps, and they're very popular. And I must admit, I wear baseball caps quite a bit as well. So the first thing is we're told that they leave the neck, ears and face exposed to sunlight. So we're covering the eyes and the front of the face, but we're not actually protecting, giving ourselves as much protection as we should be getting from UV exposure with those type of caps. So we'll just make that point. Because skin cancer is well known to be caused by exposure to the sun, so for us now today here at work, this is a work exposure. So if people are working outdoors and they've got that exposure, it's likely that they'll have a valid workers' compensation claim if they can show that their exposure was significant, more than incidental, and therefore that would be the likely or primary cause of a skin cancer. And so we're likely to see skin cancer workers' compensation claims rise in number and probably in cost over the coming years. And I'll show you some more statistics in a moment. It's also been pointed out to me there are some chemicals and plants, so in the agricultural sector, that cause photosensitivity. And so this may be related to that. So that may be an overlay for some of your workers. You will need to look at what chemicals and plants that your staff that are working outdoors might be using that might actually increase this risk further. It's interesting when I read that skin cancer kills more Australians than the road toll. And we hear a lot about the road toll, and governments spend, I think collectively, certainly over $1 billion a year in Australia, maybe multiple billions on road safety campaigns, on road laws, enforcement, etc. So there's a lot, but you don't hear near as much around skin cancer deaths. So isn't that interesting? So the road toll's getting all this attention, but skin cancer deaths actually exceed that of the road toll. So just a bit of an imbalance of our attitude in the community and possibly government here, and that 70% of us will be diagnosed with a skin cancer in our lifetime, not necessarily kill us, but diagnosed with a skin cancer that needs some treatment. So 70% is a large percentage. By the way, sunscreen does work. I found that rather reassuring because we often spend a lot of money in families buying sunscreen and getting particularly our children and younger people in our family to use it. So it does work, but what the researchers pointed out, one of the problems with sunscreen as your primary defense against skin cancer, particularly in the workplace, is that workers need to reapply it approximately every 2 hours for it to be effective. So they'd have to apply it possibly 3-4 times per day, depending on how long they work, for that to be effective. And as you know, harder to manage, supervise, and ensure that happens to actually say we had a safe system of work. So yes, it works, but it needs to be reapplied periodically to actually deliver the results. But it's nice to know it does work. So for you and I going out for a short period of time, you can have some level of assurance. It does give you a good level of protection. The other thing is, if you do have outdoor workers in your team, they have 3 to 6 times the exposure to possibly myself. I'm largely work office-based. Yes, I'm out and about, but I'm largely office-based. And so outdoor workers are getting 3 to 6 times the exposure to typical indoor workers. Be mindful of this. So we're going to work through some of the strategies to control it. The other thing is, and I didn't initially think of this when I looked into this subject, because we think we put on shirts or whatever, long sleeve shirts. Not all shirts, not all clothing, and not all PPE has a UV rating, and therefore it may not give UV protection and therefore not protect against skin cancer. So when we're buying clothing, particularly for outdoor workers, and particularly if it's prescribed company uniform and PPE, which is part of for outdoor workers protection, look for the UV rating to say, yes, we not only provided this uniform or this PPE, but it had a UV rating for our outdoor workers. So something to consider as part of your PPE policy. So looking at some protection strategies. The researchers say start number 1, minimise outdoor work in the middle of the day in particular, and particularly in the hotter months, if you like. So try and plan work that people aren't out working outdoors if that's at all possible. Of course, though, some workers are outdoors all day. That's their job. So if somebody's working on the roadside doing roadworks and maybe safety signage, they're outdoors all day. So they can't pick, oh, let's not work in the middle of the day. But if it's a periodic work, you might be able to do that. The researchers emphasise select shade before you opt for sunscreen as your primary protection, because it requires no other action by the workers to achieve the protection. Whereas I've mentioned, sunscreen augments your UV protection program, but probably shouldn't be the primary and sole strategy that you've got. So avoid outdoor in the peak worst time, midday. So obviously the sun's the highest amount of UV is getting through to the ground. Provide shade, and that could be temporary shade, could be umbrellas, could be other sort of structures that temporary structures that you put up. A number of best practice companies, number 3, have picked long longs policy. So what they mean by long longs policy is long sleeve shirts, long trousers, and that often goes with broad brimmed hat and possibly wrap around sunglasses, which I hadn't thought about either. So my prescription glasses tint, but they are not wrap around to give full UV protection for the eyes. So now we're talking about eyes, not just skin cancer. As I've mentioned, sunscreen works, but it requires people to replace it. So the items above, long policy, working under shade would be your preferred hierarchical strategy, if you like. Specify the UV rating on your clothing, work uniforms, and the best advice that I could find, medical advice, is periodic skin checks for yourself and our outdoor workers, particularly for the older outdoor workers who may be doing this for many, many years. And rule of thumb, above 55 years of age, whether that's annual, biannual, whatever, you'll get varying degrees of advice. It may be that people have a check and the specialist can then advise what frequency might be appropriate for you or for other workers that may be in your team. So as I've mentioned, October is National Safe Work Month. So Safe Work Australia have a number of documents, and you'll see there in the slide an activity kit. So all you need to do is Google National Safe Work Month or Safe Work Australia, and you'll see the activity and the kits there and ideas for what you could do with your team if you don't already have an active program that's running to deliver that level of awareness around safe work that you want to achieve. Personally, I don't wait for an annual Safe Work Month. I like the idea, and in fact, it's their slogan there: safety every job, every day. So maybe it's this month we're just getting that slogan out there, but of course, you and I are working to achieve this every day, every job, everything we do. We just want safety to be one of those considerations. So as I've mentioned, WorkSafe Victoria has said they're targeting certain industries and certain activities. So let's have a quick look. So what they've told us is they are now, in the coming weeks and months, targeting healthcare, construction, government, agriculture and manufacturing. I'm not sure what's left. That would appear to me to be a big swag of industries and workers in Victoria. And having said that, now you know the areas that they are going to be sending inspectors out. Doesn't have to be an incident. They may well roll up at the door and ask questions about your safety program. The key hazards that they tell us that they are focusing on. Falls is one of the number one. So you've got here in the right-hand image, like working at heights, off tall ladders, off roofs, etc. It could be in the health sector. You can see here falls at the same level. Slip, trip, falls could be. Violence in the workplace and bullying. So we'll come to the Victorian psychosocial regulations in a moment. Manual handling, mobile plant, and just a point on mobile plant. I believe it is every manslaughter charge so far in Australia has involved mobile plant. Isn't that interesting? So when you see mobile plant, forklifts and other trucks and things manoeuvring in close proximity to pedestrians, alarm bells should be ringing. This is dangerous. This is high risk. And so we need to think about them as mobile plant is not just convenient means of moving materials around quickly and efficiently for us, which they do, but they do it with high risk unless they're in a segregated area and pedestrians cannot go near them. That's our preferred. So this is what you should be looking for in your traffic management plan to achieve, if at all possible. And so associated with mobile plant is loading and unloading equipment. So I think that's all part of traffic management plan. So if somebody wants a quote for a traffic management plan or for a template, just let us know, Safety Action at their usual number or website, inquiries@safetyaction.com.au. So turning to Victoria's Psychological Health Regulation 2025. So the first thing is it has not been built in at the moment into the OHS regulations that apply in Victoria. They're a separate set of regulations. I'm not sure the reason why, but it doesn't make much difference. So it's a small subset, separate set of regulations called the VIC OHS, which is Occupational Health and Safety brackets Psychological Health Regulation 2025. That's what it's called. And so what it commences on the 1st of December this year. So this is coming up fairly quickly. So here we are in October, November, and these will be in force, and therefore WorkSafe Victoria will be able to visit and insist on compliance or take action if there's lack of compliance on or after the 1st of December of this year. So you need to be thinking about these regulations right now, reviewing them against your current policies and procedures and say, do our current systems accommodate this, or do we need to do something else? The nice thing is they have actually greatly reduced the requirements from the earlier draft regulations that were put out 2 or 3 years ago, and they've been simplified to the point where they largely match the WHS psychosocial regulations that are now applying every other state and jurisdiction in Australia. So we're very, very close. And the essential requirement is the requirement to identify psychosocial hazards and to control the psychological risks that are associated with it. So it's interesting that Victoria, it's only a small point, a subtle point, but they've chosen to use the term psychosocial hazards which cause psychological injury. So they're using psychosocial in relation to the hazards and that they cause psychological injury. So they're using two terms, psychological and psychosocial. Interstate in the WHS model regs, they only refer to psychosocial. So it's just one term. So it's only terminology, but just in case you're confused and say, gee, is that a typo? No, it's very deliberate in the regulation. Of course, the new regulations in relation to psychosocial hazards and psychological injuries also relates to independent contractors. So we're not in great control at a deep level with contractors, but your system needs to accommodate safety of contractors, which you should already be doing because you've already got that duty. It just means an extra duty is to be mindful of the psychosocial hazards, which would be under your control, that you should be controlling. You can't tell what contractors are saying to each other in private, in the lunchroom and off-site, but how they behave and how your staff behave to them, how your business and your policies and systems, you just need to be mindful. It includes your employees as well as your contractors. You need to review the risk controls periodically, and that could be because a health and safety rep or staff lodge a complaint or have a concern, and that's fine. There's also a compliance code which has been issued, and that's dated last month, September. So there is a VIC code compliance code. This is a bit different to interstate. So they have codes of practice, but Victoria has a compliance code, which is a deemed compliance. So if you follow the code, the compliance code, you are deemed to have complied with the regulations in the Act. So this is a little bit more powerful and instructive than a normal code of practice. So you've now got these applying in Victoria. The psychological health regulation about to start 1 December, simplified back very close to interstate requirements, which are primarily 1, identify psychosocial hazards and 2, control them. So there we go. So New South Wales have issued a whole new set of safety regulations. So they've been totally rewritten. So it's now referred to as the Work Health and Safety Regulation 2025, and it commenced on the 22nd of August this year. So it's already in force. So if you have operations in New South Wales, this set of regulations is already in force. What I can tell you, so at a high level, the vast majority of the new regulations actually are the same as the old. So if you've got good safety systems in place, they're largely going to work. So the changes are relatively small, but depending upon what you do, they may be important. So let's have a look. There's a requirement of a demolition license and for the supervisor to be present while those demolition works are underway. So a license is prescribed at a certain excuse me, for certain higher risk demolition work. So it's demolition license is not required for all demolition work. From memory, it was I think it structures above six stories using explosives for demolition, and it was machinery on suspended floors. So they're the key things that require a demolition license. An interesting area that may not affect your business directly, but I think many of us are actually ordering food and delivery riders to bring deliveries to our home. So New South Wales has got a specific section on food delivery rider regulations. So your business may not be doing this, but it's nice to know there are some regulations out there and what they should be doing. And one, the riders have to wear high vis. So you and I know not all motorbikes, not all motor scooters, not all scooters, and not all cyclists are wearing high vis. You and I probably think they should, but they're not. But now, if they're a food delivery rider, they are required to. They are required to have a food delivery safety induction before they do any food deliveries. So that's up to the firm that is taking the bookings for the food delivery to ensure that each rider has received that safety induction before they're issued with tasks. Part of the new South Wales regulations is introduced a requirement of an emergency plan for lithium batteries, great if there's more than 25,000 kilograms of lithium batteries on site. And this includes in cars. And I'm told a typical electric car battery within the electric car may weigh something like 450 to 500 kilograms. So half a ton. So based on that, you might be allowed to have 50 cars, electric cars on site, but you need to check because different makes and models will have different weight batteries. But if it was 500 kilogram battery, that'd be exceeding 50 electric cars on site. And that could be workers coming to work. It could be because your business is a car dealer, and so they've got a lot and a car lot there that may get to that point. So our clients and friends that are in the car industry are starting to work through this now. What will that lithium battery emergency plan look like, and when do we have to have it in place? The New South Wales regs also introduced some requirements around tree lopping and the fall arrest system and the relevant Australian standard for that. So once again, I think for most of our friends and readers and clients of Safety Action, I'm not aware of any that are doing tree lopping as a full-time business, but just be aware there are some regulations around that. The New South Wales regulations did a very, very minor change around their psychosocial risks. They claimed they enhanced the requirements, but between you and me, I couldn't see the difference reading both. So as far as I can tell, you've always had to use the hierarchy of control, and you don't just do administrative and training to solve psychosocial. If we need to change the layout of the workplace or some equipment that's causing psychosocial stress on people, then you need to deal with it. So the hierarchy of control applies. I thought I could see that in both the old and the new regs, but they say it's new, so that's fine. What the regs have also done is acknowledged that the Australian standard, which is an international ISO standard, 45001 Occupational Safety Management Systems, is recognised as a competent safety system. So if anyone is required, either by a client or by WorkSafe, to have a competent safety management system, then compliance with that 45001 system is recognised under the New South Wales regulations as a competent safety system. It's not to say other systems can't be competent, but I think prima facie they'll accept it if it has that certification to that level. So there's the New South Wales regulations if you've got operations there, and they're already in force, those regulations. So before we finish up at the end of our quick half-hour typical webinar, what is the difference between a working with children check and a police check? And many people assume they're the same, and I think they'll have a lot of overlap. So what I can tell you is the prime difference is a police check won't allow working with children. So it's not designed to deliver that. So that's the first thing. There's no pass or fail for a police check, but there is a pass or fail for a working with children check. So when people go through the working with children check, they pass or fail, and you've got that. What a police check does is only list known infringements, or sorry, not infringements, criminal prosecutions. So that's what a police check will deliver to an employer, so you know that they've got certain convictions. And they'll only be convictions. So there may be other things known about the person, but it may or may not actually appear in that police check. A working with children check is valid for 5 years, whereas a police check is only valid for the date it's issued. So it's just telling you, this is what we know at this date. Whereas a working with children check moves forward 5 years, unless they would revoke that working with children check if the authority becomes aware of some other behaviour which doesn't meet. They'll review the professional conduct from prescribed bodies, may give that information. So that's the essence of the difference between a police check and a working with children check. So they have a slightly different purpose, and don't assume a police check says, oh, they passed that, because there is no such thing as a pass, and will not allow them to be working with children. And you and I have heard on the media, they've obviously ramped up the working with children check and probably revoking them quicker now when information becomes available. So can you use your volunteer working with children check card for work? Because remember, the checks are identical. So we know the person prima facie is a good person, we believe, and should be safe to work with children. And the answer is no, simply because if you're a volunteer, so I've previously had a working with children check for the Duke of Edinburgh's International Award as a director of that organisation, and we said everyone in the Duke of Ed organisation will have a working with children check. As a volunteer, you get that for free. So the government don't impose a cost for anyone working as a volunteer, and not just with the Duke of Ed, but with any other volunteer role where that's required. So sporting or organisations, etc., working with children, they can get that free. Whereas if you're an employee and you need that as part of your work, like working possibly in hospitals, childcare, teachers, they have a cost, and so there's a fee. So you can't use it for work simply because you're dodging the fee there. Not that the check is different, simply you're trying to dodge a fee, and the employers and the government will say, no, that's not a valid card for that reason. So but as far as I can tell, that's the only reason, is that you're dodging a fee, whereas they, I think quite rightly, provide it free for volunteers. So that's a quick run through the highlights of what's happened around safety in Australia over the last month. We thank you for joining us, and always for your support. If you have need of safety advice or a safety audit or safety training, if you just think of Safety Action, we're happy to talk to you and provide a quote. Andrea was obviously not able to join us today, but she's out and about. But myself, Gary Rowe, thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you next month. Thank you once again.